Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and it now being 5:41 on Thursday, January 11th, I will go ahead and call to order this regular meeting of the Deschutes County Planning Commission. I apologize to anyone listening. Everyone here heard my explanation, but I am late because it took me almost an hour to drive 2 miles. Lots of gummed up roads out there. So, our first order of business is going to be the election of a new chair and vice chair. And so without further ado, I'll go ahead and entertain any nominations that people may want to make for chair.
I'll make a motion.
A nomination? Sure.
I would like to nominate Commissioner Williams for chair.
Second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Cyrus?
I move to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Commissioner Williams.
So I don't think we need a motion for that. I think actually I can, if there are no other nominations, I can actually just declare Commissioner Williams chair by acclamation. But for fun, let's go ahead and vote.
However you want to do it.
Let's go ahead and vote just for fun. Okay, Commissioner Cyrus, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Hofkamp?
Aye.
Commissioner Altman?
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly?
Aye.
And Commissioner Williams, do you wish to vote?
I would think it prudent to abstain.
Okay, and I will vote yes as well. So that's, oh, and do we have Commissioner Trowbridge?
I am here.
What's that?
Aye.
Aye, okay, great. So we have the nomination for chair is now, sorry. So whew, still wearing off the jitters. Commissioner Williams, you are now the chair of the Planning Commission. Congratulations. And so as is correct, I will go ahead and turn over the meeting to you, and we can proceed with nominations of vice chair.
Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Madam Chair, I would nominate Commissioner Karas.
I will second.
Now you ask for other.
Do we have any other nominations for vice chair? That being said, for funsie, we will vote.
Are you done?
Commissioner Cyrus,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Hofkamp,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly, Commissioner Altman, Commissioner Trowbridge,
Aye.
Commissioner Curis,
I'm going to abstain too.
and I would also vote aye. We have 6 for Commissioner Curis to be vice chair and 1 abstention. Okay, next order of business is the approval of minutes from December 14th. Do I have any motions?
I will move to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
All right. And Commissioner Cyrus,
Aye.
Commissioner Hofkamp.
Aye.
Commissioner Curis,
Aye.
Vice Chair Curis, Commissioner Altman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner Trowbridge.
Aye.
I will also vote aye, so we approve the minutes 7-0. And do we have anyone online for public comment? Alrighty, as we do not have any public present, we will move to the action items, the first of which is pre-deliberations for the Deschutes County 2040 Comprehensive Plan Update, and Senior Planner Nicole Mardell.
All right. Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me okay? I always want to check these mics. Okay, great.
Barely.
Perfect. So before we begin, I have just a quick overview, just to ground us before we start this pre-deliberations meeting, as we're calling it. So this is for the Deschutes County 2040 project. Just to provide a bit of background, the draft document was posted on August 30th, and we had public hearings on October 26th, November 10th, December 14th, and the written record closed on December 28th. Throughout that hearing process, we heard oral testimony from 10 individuals, including one agency commenter. We received 132 written public comments on a variety of issues that are described in detail in your memo. And we also received agency comments from Central Oregon Irrigation District, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the City of Bend. So before we begin, we wanted to give you kind of the big picture. What is the role of the Planning Commission with a comprehensive plan update process? This is such a unique work item for the Planning Commission. It's a little bit different than what you normally take on, like a text amendment process where we bring you a draft and you weigh in on it, and then we bring that Planning Commission recommendation to the board. The Planning Commission has been very involved in the drafting of this over the last 16 months, including pretty extensive policy review. So we wanted to kind of walk you through some of the options for communicating your blessing on this document to the board and how that could work. What are some potential avenues? So the first one would be, you're feeling overall pretty happy where the document is. You feel comfortable with it without any changes, except for maybe some minor edits like Scrivener error updates, terminology changes, things like that. You feel like it's ready to go. We think that's maybe potentially unlikely. There's always a little something you could do. The second item would be that you're generally happy, but maybe there's a need for some policy revisions. There might be some new topics from the record or just some compelling community feedback. So you want to bring forward some changes to those policies or narrative text or goals to discuss as a group. And maybe in this case, you want to have specific votes on each particular item, or potentially you just want to bring forward topics to discuss and try to find consensus and bring that forward as a package. So kind of the difference between those two would be whether or not you want the board to know explicitly how the Planning Commission voted. So I'll use the example of the mule deer inventory process. From what I remember, there are certain items where it was really important to know if the board voted, for instance, 4-3 or 7-0, just kind of creating that compelling point through the specific vote. But you're not required to. We, of course, as staff, always try to bring forward a narrative of what the most discussed items were, what some of the push and pull was between different perspectives from the community and between planning commissioners. So voting on each particular item isn't necessarily, required if you didn't want to. The fourth option that I wanted to note is that you always have the option to appear before the board during the public hearing process as an individual participant. So this would be if you're, a community member who feels really strongly about a particular issue, you could attend as a community member rather than as representing the PC before the board to kind of speak on behalf of the issue that's really important to you. So this might pop up if there's something that you feel really strongly about, but maybe you don't feel like the Planning Commission needs to discuss it at length. It's more of an item of interest that you personally care a lot about. So those are some options. How does that lead into your deliberations, and how might that change the approach to deliberations? If you were feeling pretty comfortable with how the plan is as drafted today, again, you're totally comfortable kind of moving it on. That would be on the spectrum of your engagement during deliberations, the most limited. That'd be maybe an hour or so at the next meeting. Moderate engagement would look more like that second or third option that I previously mentioned, where you bring forth a really limited number of issues into the matrix and into deliberations, and you feel generally the plan is okay. It's representative of community interests. It's in a good place to move forward, but there are just a few revisions or a few tweaks that need to be made. And although you might not feel like you've been able to maybe weigh in on every single word that you want to talk about, you might not be able to wordsmith, you feel generally okay moving that forward. The last item or the last kind of approach could be discussing and voting on a significant number of issues with major engagement. And this would be an example if you felt, based on community input or just through the process so far through the public hearing, that there were some really substantial edits that still needed to be made to this document. It might be, something that we potentially missed during the iterative process, or just maybe some information has changed over time, or you found some community input to be engaging and you wanted to make those changes. This would be, I think, really appropriate if we somehow missed the mark on certain chapters or sections or policies. Don't be afraid, if there are things that pop up where it's, hey, we already talked about this, but I want to revisit it. This is really the time to do that before it moves forward into that second step. So although the Planning Commission has been very involved, and I will note that we did have 2 commissioners come in at the tail end of that process, we definitely still seek your feedback, as we continue to run through these iterations of this document. So with that being said, for tonight's meeting, again, this is kind of a new approach. We're kind of calling this pre-deliberations, but we titled the meeting deliberations as some procedural protection in case the conversation, goes a little bit in depth. We still have that protection from, anyone, wanting to listen into your discussion about these issues. So for tonight, we're hoping that you'll be able to use the memo in the packet that we provided that lists all those public comments separated into kind of issue areas and identify as each commissioner your issues of interest. So what do you want to bring forward into a deliberations matrix that includes, more detail on that topic, some of the pros and cons from public comments, some of our staff comments, maybe about legality of state law, or some additional considerations, and also some policy options to choose from, so that it can help guide your conversation. In the packet, you'll see we've laid out a table. So it includes about 54 items listed, but it's more like 112, including all of the sub-bullets. So there are quite a few topics listed there. And you'll see the second column has a check mark if the Planning Commission previously discussed it or touched on this topic during your policy review. And then in the last column, what policy that might relate to, if you had discussed it previously. So that was intended to kind of reflect back, what have we already kind of discussed or worked through during the policy review process? And I found through that about 66 of those were previously discussed, so just under 60%. So, you could always revisit those issues, but just wanted to note that for a lot of them, there were some pretty substantial conversations during the drafting of that text. So our goal is to, kind of hopefully narrow down this list of, 112 topics, 112 total areas, so that the matrix is more manageable. If we gave it to you now, this matrix would be 300 to 500 pages. So we do really want to focus in on those key areas. We found that it would be helpful for there not to be consensus on what to bring forward. If one commissioner wanted to bring forward a topic, we think it should just be included in that matrix. It doesn't necessarily have to be agreed upon by the entire commission. And we do ask that just for this evening, you do save substantive comments for the 25th, because again, we'll have more information through that matrix. And then we'll also have our planning consultant, Matt Hasty, here to help answer any questions as well. So this evening, we're essentially looking for each commissioner to say, hey, I want to talk about item 18A, 19D, item 2, item 54, and you can maybe talk about which topic that is, just so I'm tracking the numbers correctly. But that's essentially what we're looking for this evening, just to be able to bring back that meeting. So again, next steps, the second meeting for deliberations will take place on the 25th, and after the conversation today, we'll return with that decision matrix. But with that, are there any questions, or I'm happy to jump right in as well.
Madam Chair. I would have a
Cyrus?
question. So are you looking for direction tonight on which specific numbers, et cetera, that we're looking that we individually would be interested in discussing, or you want us to just email you a list of maybe just the numbers on this sheet that we're looking at within the next week?
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner. I would say we're looking for those specific numbers this evening so that we can get working on that matrix, because the deadline for the packet will be next Thursday. So if possible, yeah, if all commissioners could look through that list. I have included a couple paper copies up there, but I didn't print enough for every commissioner. So feel free to share them. But that being said, I mean, I'll maybe look to Will, but I think if something pops up for you after this meeting, shoot, I really wanted to include item, 14. I think that would be appropriate to email us as well, and we can just provide that feedback in our opening remarks about which items came in after the meeting.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So I kind of went through and made a list of some topics that may not relate exactly to numbers or specific comments from the public, but maybe encompass several comments from the public. Can I go ahead and share just maybe a couple of those?
Yes, great question, Commissioner, and absolutely. Yeah, so you're not beholden to that list. It was just intended to provide assistance, but if anything's not on there or you just want to word it your own way, feel free to do that. That's perfectly fine.
Okay. So a couple conversations I thought were really good that we had previously and probably would be good to revisit. One is the rezoning of farmland to open space designation as a new possible alternative, and that related to a couple different policy numbers, but maybe most specifically to 3.3.6, both A and B. I just thought that was a really interesting conversation when we had it before, and then reading back through the plan, I really liked the way that you all worded it, and I don't have any qualms about it. It's perfect the way it is from my perspective, but I think it would be good to talk about it again and see where everyone else is landing with that wording about that. Another one, I guess I shouldn't have said that I was good with the wording. Darn it. Okay, scratch that. I have no idea how I feel about the wording. Okay, for the recreation section, I thought we should probably revisit the trails discussion. We got 8.1.2 and 8.1.8 as examples of things that we could discuss further, having had that discussion recently as part of the transportation system plan update. And then I also think we should talk about housing and destination resorts, and water, and anything else anyone else wants to talk about. But those are really general. I don't have super specific requests on those, but.
And Vice Chair Karas, when you say housing destination resorts, is that housing within destination resorts?
Great question. Actually, the housing chapter in the plan, I thought was really interesting, but I'm going to withhold saying anything. And destination resorts as a separate topic, because there's a lot of comments and energy about destination resorts. Again, I don't have a specific comment number to point to, but I would be disappointed if we went through this process and didn't talk about destination resorts.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, if I will, or if I may, yeah, and I would ask, we are going to use this information to bring back, the matrix with policy options. So if you can be specific, I wouldn't worry too much about providing comments about what you think is interesting, because that can help us kind of frame issues in the matrix. I think we're just trying to avoid, a full conversation about a specific policy this evening.
Vice Chair Karas, do you want to clarify any of your drop points for direction that you would like to see the matrix go in?
That's a great question too. I thought a little bit about that, and I found myself a little bit confused as to exactly what am I asking for to be in the matrix when it comes to even just the two items I was more specific about. So I don't, unfortunately, I don't have any good suggestions. I just wanted to kind of bring them forward as things that I would like us to talk about in some way. And even if there isn't any more information than just that, just what we already have, read the plan. That's fine with me too. Great question. I don't have any specific requests.
Would it make sense to line up the items with some of the public comment, like the for and against certain items as part of the matrix?
That sounds good.
So where we know, some folks are leaning this way, some are leaning that way, but maybe we have a little bit of their actual, like, this is what we want.
Yeah, like maybe it would say like for my thing about rezoning land to open space, like maybe we would have like here's the topic name and here's some of the policies in the plan that it relates with. And then some people liked that idea and some people didn't like that idea. And then here's why they liked or didn't like it. Something like that. maybe?
And maybe what the majority leaned toward
That would be great too. Yeah.
of public input.
Absolutely. And just to manage expectations, Chair and Commissioners, so I was talking with Will about this and, there are a few topics where there's a very clear numerical value to those in support and against. But a lot of these public comments, there were a variety of different lenses on an issue or different kind of permutations of the issue. So it will be difficult, I think, for us to have a specific policy or a specific topic and say this many in support and this many against in some cases, just because there's such a range of different perspectives. But where we can, we'll definitely try to include that information. And where we can't, I think we'll just try to be more descriptive about some of the items in the record.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Cyrus, do you have any items of interest that you would like discussed at the deliberation with the matrix on January 25th?
I'll send her a list in the next day or so. I
And
have about 10 so far.
okay. And then is it possible to have that list shared with the commissioners prior to the meeting on the 25th?
Yes. Yeah, we can email that out to the group.
That would be great. Thank you. And Commissioner Hovkamp?
Ask for a moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Commissioner Altman?
My thoughts are not as organized as Vice Chair Curtis's thoughts. In a broader context, the things that I would like to see a matrix on are wildlife, goal 5, water, and how, just generally speaking, it seems like there are a lot of comments on your chart here about water. So I think that that's a very big issue for people, and it's often referred to as pros or cons for whatever the topic at hand might be. Zoning of farmland. What else did I have? I don't know if now is the time to, when might be the time to bring it up, but I thought that Landwatch submitted extensive text change propositions, all of which I actually liked and found reasonable. So I don't know how you incorporate that into the matrix, but I think it deserves everyone's attention to read those and decide either line item by line item or just all together. We think it's a good idea. Housing, specifically rural ADUs, RVs, which I know we'll be talking about, and also short-term rentals. What's going on with that? I think that's it. And natural hazards. And I think those are my biggest areas of interest.
Commissioner Kelsey?
Yes, and I'll be honest, I feel like I'm kind of late to the party and I'm excited to discuss, in a couple weeks, these issues. So the things that I've kind of noted are I'm with Jessica with the trails. I'm super interested in connectivity of our towns. I'm also very interested in water, specifically groundwater, as a human that had to deepen her well this year. Destination resorts are interesting to me as well. And then I'm just kind of, I keep coming back to like, okay, so this is a document about like, community goals and aspirations and like, kind of big picture items. And so I'm trying to balance in my mind like that with specific texts and policies. So I'm excited to discuss it, but that's kind of what's been on my mind.
Is Commissioner Trowbridge still with us?
Yes, I am here.
All right, don't have
Um,
you on our screen, so I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
sorry, I'm trying to click it. There it goes. It didn't go on. Yeah, I'm here and I'm definitely interested in obviously I'm a housing advocate. I want to see everybody in this county have a shot at living here in some sort of a stable, safe environment. And so I definitely am obviously interested in those aspects as well as trails. I love using the trails here. I echo Kelsey on a lot of that stuff. I think we kind of align a lot on those types of things. And just in general, I just want to be a part of the conversation with what a lot of the other commissioners have said. So that's kind of, I'm definitely going to admit that housing is definitely a focus of mine because I see a lot of people struggle here, and I have three sons that live here, and if they didn't have the opportunity to live, with us and opportunities we made, they'd be in a different situation. And I see a lot of people that don't have that luxury. So I definitely, that's my empathy, and my heart goes out to people that want to be here and want to work and be a part of the community. I want to make sure that we as a county also take a role in that, not just leave it to the city. Anyway, that's my take on that.
All right, thank you. And Commissioner Hovkamp.
Yeah, thanks for giving me a minute or two. I wanted to count up how many I've got. I've got 6, if it's okay.
Absolutely.
And I can follow up also, Nicole, as Commissioner Cyrus mentioned, if it's necessary, but I'll just, I agree with the observation of my colleague, Commissioner Altman, that Central Oregon Land Watch, as a local land use advocacy organization, submitted extensive and substantive comments a couple of times into the public record in regards to the comprehensive plan. And I wanted to highlight a half dozen of those. They submitted quite a few, but I just want to highlight half a dozen of those, some of which overlap some observations that have already been made by my colleagues up here. I'm going to reference, I think it's their first submission to the public record, which I have dated as October 24, although they submitted a red line version closely paralleling those comments subsequently. But there were some comments to the effect in regards to Chapter 2 of the updated comp plan on land use and regional coordination. These were wording, but important wording comments about purpose statements rather than a particular policy, Nicole. And for instance, a purpose statement that, as it exists now in the draft, that in regards to agriculture, to preserve and maintain agricultural lands for farm use, Landwatch suggested tagging on to that, and to protect agricultural land from encroaching development impacts. Like to hear my colleagues' thoughts on that. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Along with that, same thing, a purpose statement wording in regards to forest lands in the introductory material in Chapter 2. As it is, it says to conserve forest lands for multiple forest uses. Sounds great. Landwatch suggested again, and to protect forest lands from encroaching development impacts. So that would be my first request, please, to elevate that, to see where my colleagues stand on that. Second, of 6, there's a policy. This one is a particular policy. I think the number is 2.1.1. So it's still in Chapter 2. That I think the wording now is balance the consideration of private property rights and the economic impacts of land use decisions on property owners with other community goals identified in the comprehensive plan. And Landwatch suggestions, I don't need to go into them in detail, but they suggested that we elaborate on community goals just a bit. I think that's a reasonable suggestion. For instance, they mention preservation of agriculture and forest land, again, wildlife habitat, groundwater and surface water, wetlands, riparian areas, and open space. Explicitly mentioned, since again, property rights and economic impacts are kind of specifically mentioned on the other end. Third, is that okay?
I'm wondering, would it make more sense to just send that to you, Nicole? And then again, you can suss it out to all of us so that we have time to read that. Or would you prefer that he continue with the specific bullet points?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners, and I would prefer just to get those out now so that again, we can start working on them
You bet.
immediately.
I'll go through them if
Go for it.
Thank you for the discretion, Chair. There is third, a suggestion around policy 2.2.6. The wording now, I believe, is collaborate with federal agencies on land management issues, including homelessness, sustainable recreation, and energy projects. And again, those are probably great, but Landwatch suggests, I believe, reasonably adding to some of the issues that we might want to have in our comp plan language about collaborating with federal agencies, rather than just those three. That's 2.2.6. So that's half of them. A four suggestion has to do with Chapter 7 on natural hazards. Skipping quite a bit forward. The existing language is these landscapes, however, are now significantly altered due to increased rural development and a general lack of large-scale treatments, meaning forest treatments, resulting in overgrown forest with dense fuels that burn more intensely than in the past. Landwatch brought up a number of points in regards to that, wording, substantive points that I believe merit further consideration. So that is, again, in regards to Chapter 7, natural hazards, wording on alteration of forests with forest management policies. Just two more. Thanks for your indulgence. In Landwatch's substantive testimony, there is commentary in regards to Chapter 9, economic development, in particular, Goal 9.2. Right now, that goal reads support creation and continuation of rural commercial areas that support rural communities while not adversely affecting nearby agricultural and forest uses. Landwatch contends that this goal is contrary to law and should be deleted. And I didn't see that in the matrix. I don't know if it was addressed in the commentary. My bad if I'm forgetting that. But that seems like a pretty sharp point that we might want to elevate to deliberation, please. That's Goal 9.2, whether it should just be deleted altogether. Last. Goal 9.3 reads support, this kind of goes with the last, support the creation and continuation of rural industrial areas that support rural communities while not adversely affecting nearby agricultural and forest uses. Again, Landwatch makes a fairly strong contention there that there's no such thing as rural industrial areas, though there's the possibility for some industrial uses outside urban growth boundaries. So would just like pleased to elevate consideration of their objection to Goal 9.3 and see where my colleagues land on that. Those are my half dozen suggestions from their larger body of suggestions. Thanks for hearing me out, and thank you, Chair, for your indulgence, and colleagues.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just realized or figured out how to further clarify what I'm interested in with destination resorts. So if you don't mind if I add that.
Please do.
Okay, so on comment 44A, they're talking about limiting destination resorts within 100 air miles or 100 miles of Bend. And I know that that depends on adopting a new map. So I wondered if we can have some kind of discussion about additional limitations as in 11.72 in the plan, or 11.7.4 when it talks about adopting a map. So or other options that the county may have for somehow planning for when do new destination resorts stop. I think for a long time, people understood that they would stop once spend got to 100,000, but since that's not the case, what's our new stop point, would be the question, or the thing that I want to see possibilities or information about.
All right, and some of the issues that I would discuss also, and I'm in agreement with Vice Chair Curris regarding destination resorts. It was very solidly recommended to the Board of County Commissioners that we limit destination resorts, and there was a change of vote by one of the county commissioners, and I would like to readdress that. Another item is had a piece of paper folded over here. There we go. Okay, this would be in goal 3, and I have it written down from somewhere that if you cannot camp within 1 mile of agricultural land, or I believe that you cannot camp within 1 mile of agricultural land. Does that sound familiar, Commissioner Cyrus? Because I have this written down that camping, or maybe it's a specific distance that you cannot camp near agricultural land, because I have this written down like again and again and again. My concern would be, why would we allow trails that close to agricultural land if you cannot camp that close to agricultural land?
Yeah, I don't recall the specifics on that, but I do know they had issues in the Willamette Valley that actually went up through Beluga, at least, regarding trails adjacent to resource lands, and the fact because of the impacts on agricultural lands. Oh, excuse me.
Nicole, if any of that sounds vaguely familiar, I'd like to discuss it. And if I'm way off track, I don't know where I would have gotten this.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think, for the purpose of deliberations, I think it just could come back as the general topic of trails adjacent to agricultural land, just for the commission to weigh in on.
All right. And then roughly in chapter 1, regarding community involvement, we had an 11th grader give testimony that he would like to specifically see educational involvement regarding community development, community involvement. And I would like to bring to the table of clarifying, in addition to just serving as a community involvement program, that we maybe look at having educational opportunities. And then I think I had one more, but everyone's kind of already talked. Yeah. Something I think we might want to discuss is Ben Parks and Rec. City voters approved the bridge at the south end of town. It's not necessarily a county item. However, I believe it's on federal land to city land. It's adjacent to private land that there's been a lot of skerfuffle, and it's kind of, the brakes have been put on it. I don't know. Do we want to just address so that the people understand that we hear them, but we're not active talkers at the table?
Yeah, good question, Chair. So I would say that, overall, I think it's unclear about the county's role in that project. There is the potential that that project would potentially cross over county land, even just a small snippet. So I think it's up to the Planning Commission how much you want to discuss that in depth in terms of creating a goal or a policy. The policy that we referred to in your packet is, we do have 2 existing policies, one that discusses supporting regional trail networks and connections, and the other supporting, agencies in development of their adopted plans. So that's what we've included that kind of touches on that topic. But if the commission would like to discuss it further, you certainly could.
Yeah, and I might add, Madam Chair, that the transportation system plan update, which the Board of County Commissioners just reopened the written record because there was some correspondences that didn't get in time from the Bend MPO and from also the city of Bend. But as I recall imperfectly, there was a general recognition in the transportation system plan of that opportunity as identified with the Bend Parks and Recreation District. So I think everyone's remarks this evening are acknowledging there's not a leadership role for Deschutes County. There may be, if there is momentum for that bridge, and they resolve the scenic waterway restrictions, and there's a process there. But there could be a review responsibility with an application. But I recall this imperfectly, that the TSP update does note it, and in a way that is attentive to the dynamics that exist between property owners, environmentalists, the park district's interests, and there were some recent quotes about that. So to the extent that you want to continue to have that as part of a discussion, as part of the comp plan, of course, that's well within your purview. But I think the way we've conceptualized it is the TSP really gets into a little bit more specificity than the comp plan, because of course the TSP, the transportation system plan, is a chapter of the comprehensive plan. So what we can do is maybe bring back that language as it's drafted currently, if you're interested in that bridge topic.
That would be nice. And one last thing, I know we're going to discuss COIDs, wording and things like that. But one thing they did specifically mention, and are they a quasi-municipal corporation?
Yeah, so I think that's something that we as staff can include in the matrix, is the particular statutory definition and then their language, just for contrast. I believe when we reviewed it previously, it did match statute, but I just want to verify that before confirming. Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
And I did just email a list I have about 20 of them on my list. So
Okay.
I figured it was easier than spending a half hour going through them.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then Nicole, at your leisure, if you could share that with us. And does anyone else have any items that they would like to discuss at the next meeting?
I have a question.
Commissioner Kelly?
Will you be emailing us that matrix in advance of our meeting?
The matrix will be included in the packet, so it'll be available a week before the meeting. Great. Well, so thank you. Oh, go ahead.
If we want to email you more specificity about what we would like to see on the matrix, what would be your deadline for that?
I would say if I could ask commissioners to email me by Monday morning before 11 a.m., that would be ideal. Just again, so that we have adequate time to work through all these issues, vet some options for you. So yes, Monday at 11 would be ideal. But again, if something pops up to you, I'll still accept it. Thanks.
And if I may just value added, I think, of course, this is it's an extensive document, and I think with Nicole's leadership, I think our hope is that as you have and will continue to provide us with items that warrant conversation through deliberations with the Planning Commission, that those items that you didn't discuss of course, you could revisit them at any time, but those items that didn't get elevated, we're assuming that you're comfortable with it. And that includes not just the goals and the policies, but the narrative, the background, the context. So, that'll be helpful for us in terms of preparing for the matrix for your deliberations. But I want to underscore it. Commissioner Kelly and I had this conversation just one-on-one earlier in the week, that you may find whether it's your next meeting or your first meeting in February, and you've gone through all of the iterative aspects that each of you have identified, and you've figured out where there's consensus, maybe even where you need to take a vote. I think what I would have you think about is, before you make the vote to adopt with the respective revisions, that you maybe set that aside for one other meeting and think about all of the conversations that have occurred, or that of course will be occurring, so that when you come back, you're fresh. We can figure out how to do track changes, and that way, all of you, your stamina, your analysis can be, thoroughly reconfirmed. This is a big document, and you've heard this come from many of us. We want you to have enough time to really go through it. So this is the first step in deliberations, as we're just beginning to identify your priorities, but we want to make sure you have ample time to really feel comfortable with the entire document. So thanks for letting us go through that.
And one more for me. In this sheet, chapter 2, item 5, conduct area-specific analysis for Three Rivers. I know that the Newberry plan is being updated, but that does not include Three Rivers South, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, if I may, yes, great point. So the existing Newberry Country Plan, I believe the boundary is everything south of Lava Butte, but it didn't specifically call out Three Rivers. So in the public comments and in conversations with those community members, they did ask for that specific call out and some specific analysis. So when we did present this as a work plan item to the board, we did note that Three Rivers should be included in the document. So, when that document is updated, I think it will have a greater profile, just so that you're aware. But in addition to that, if there's additional policies that you feel warrant inclusion in the comprehensive plan, we can discuss that as well.
Thank you.
I add one thing, Madam Chair. Just want piggybacking on Peter's comments, acknowledge that it's a big document. It's a big piece of work. One of the things that I was most excited about getting on this commission was the opportunity to participate in this discussion. Thanks for continuing to bring it back. Thanks for your patience and objectivity in dealing with our comments. I will commit to you colleagues up here that in the last few steps that we have before we ship this off to the next body, that I will, I think staff is too gentle and deferential to bring this up, but we've got this column here about prior PC discussion. Some of these are things that we've already really kind of wrestled with. And they didn't all break in the way that I would have them break, but that's the nature of a group collaborative process. So I will commit to you colleagues that further comments that I have, I hope will be pretty much new ones and based upon some of the testimony that we received. And so that we can continue to kind of make incremental progress rather than rehashing things that we might have thrashed around in before. Again, staff too kind to comment on that, but I imagine that that's a productive way to think about this. Anyway, thank you, and I'm pleased to reach this landmark anyway, where we're analyzing some of the public commentary and doing this pre-deliberative process, and hopefully have a refined grid that we can look at in making our final recommendations. Thanks. Those are my last comments.
And I'm not sure, but maybe item 19E, it has been addressed multiple times by a couple of folks regarding mule deer declines. I know we've sussed it out, but again, it was something that was brought to the BOCC with a fairly large majority that was rejected. And do we want to reword how our decline of mule deer is listed, or do we want to keep it as it is in the comprehensive plan? Thank you.
Yeah, so commissioners, just to wrap up. So thank you again for just highlighting these issues of interest. I think we have slimmed down this list of 112 to a manageable size. So in areas where the topic was more general, we'll just try to bring forward comments that relate to that topic. I think just to keep your packet relatively short, we'll try to include if possible, just the chapters that pertain to the issues that were raised. I didn't really hear any comments about, say, mineral and aggregate resources. So I think it's safe to say maybe you don't need that in your packet to slim it down a little bit. And yes, we'll bring forward this with the matrix. And again, if you have any other items that come to mind over the weekend, feel free to shoot me an email by 11 a.m. And then I'll forward out any new topics and Commissioner Cyrus's topics that he identified to the group.
Madam Chair, question for Nicole.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there's a procedural reason why we have to have any of the plan in the next packet, given that it's in the current packet, and we could just look at the current packet to reference it, or do we have to have the chapters we're discussing in whatever packet is for that night for any reason?
Great question, Commissioner. It's more for ease of reference. So if the commission feels that you don't need it included as an attachment in the next packet, we don't have to include it. Usually we do just so that it's easy access. You could just click on the link for that packet or review it. But it's not required by any, procedural requirement.
Is there maybe a way it could be extracted in the packet or like a line of demarcation? Because if there are people who are of the public and are interested in this this matrix meeting we're having, they might want to be able to reference it a little easier and not have to try to find it in the past.
That's a good point. Yeah. Maybe we should just do exactly what you suggested then ahead of time, and I'll withdraw my suggestion to just, because you're right, like we know where it is, but we have gotten a lot of feedback over the years of people having trouble finding things. So we should make it as easy as possible for people not here tonight to find it.
Great.
Any more questions for Nicole? All righty. Thank you, Nicole. Awesome as always. And our next action item is deliberations, pre-deliberations, RVs as rental dwellings, and we will have Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me? Okay. Never know with these. Thanks. Just get situated here. One moment. Yep. They gave him something.
Nicole, should I maybe for the record state that we will hold deliberations for the 2040 comprehensive plan on Thursday, January 25th?
Thanks for bearing with me. We're trying to figure this out. Well, I just emailed it to you. It was me.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll just. yell next slide. Thank you. Sorry about that. Zoom likes to keep us on our toes. So for the record, Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner. I'm here tonight before you for deliberations for RVs as rental dwellings. File number 247-23000-700 TA. In this presentation, I'm basically going to go over what's in the memo. So a summary of the input received, written and verbal at the hearings and in the public record. And then I'll go through a few points of deliberation. So it's essentially what's in the memo. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, the project website and the full record are available at www.deschutes.org/RV amendments. Pursuant to our regular procedure, staff provided DLCD with 35-day notice on October 4th, and the first evidentiary hearing was held on November 9th. Next slide, please. The Planning Commission process, you all were here, but I'm going to provide a review anyway. So as I noted, the first public hearing was held on November 9th. That was then continued to December 14th. At that time, the hearing was closed and the written record was held open until December 28th. As far as testimony, staff received 36 written comments from individuals. This includes multiples. So some people wrote in a couple of times, and 23 in-person participants over those two hearings. Some people, it should be noted, participated in a hearing as well as submitted written documents. So that's just sort of a general sense of the universe that we're talking. Testimony themes. So I'm going to go over the general themes that were received from the public. I'm going to go through opponents first. In general, I would say the biggest one of the biggest comments from opponents was the adverse effects on property values. And this kind of related to all of the other reasons that the opponents brought up. So more specifically, people were concerned about adverse effects on rural character and community in the rural county. This many potential additional dwellings would compromise rural character and the very reasons that people moved to those areas. They, in many cases, felt that RVs in most capacity should be either limited to cities or to RV parks. People were concerned about traffic from those additional dwellings, as well as impacts to the roads themselves, like the physical impact. People were concerned about the wildfire risk from that increased number of dwellings, especially noting that these RVs as rental dwellings do have a tendency to have some aspect of outdoor living because they are relatively small spaces. So people are doing potentially more things outside. Next slide, please. Additional themes, and I'm sorry this is so small, but these are comments that were less popular, but they were still received usually from one person or one or two people. Concerns about impacts on wildlife, concerns about domestic animals disturbing humans and agriculture in the area. One person noted that RVs as rental dwellings are not noted either in the comprehensive plan or the Tumalo community plan. Some people, I believe it was in Deschutes River Woods areas, they were concerned that those areas don't already have regular trash pickup. So they were wondering about how that would shake out if there were going to be RVs in that area. One or two people noted that there's no evidence of how this would potentially help affordable housing or homelessness. One person had concerns about landlord-tenant law and the inability to evict somebody in a timely fashion. Concerns about effect on water, concerns about the effect on dark skies. There was a suggestion to wait and see the impact of the recent ADU legislation before adopting this proposal, and concerns about crime. And now on to the supporters. So the themes, large themes from the supporters were that RVs as rental dwellings would provide additional housing options that are potentially more affordable than a standard single-family dwelling. There were some examples of people who provided testimony who have lived in this type of situation, unclear if Deschutes County or not, but this allowed them to help save up for a future home or purchase. Some people just want a smaller footprint. They don't want a big house. So this was just different options of housing types. Provides for financial opportunities for the property owners. They could get income from being a landlord, essentially. And then this proposal would give an opportunity for a legal opportunity for those currently living in RVs illegally. We know they're out there. This would provide more certainty both for the residents as well as the surrounding community if they know that there was some rules set in place for the people in these situations. Next slide, please. Many small comments here as well. Several people have requested a smaller minimum acreage. Currently, the draft proposal had the minimum acreage as 1 acre. This would allow, having a smaller requirement would allow for more opportunities for this type of housing. Some people wanted to look at 1/2 acre, and we did provide a map and a general mapping and numbers count of potential properties that would be eligible if this was lower to 1/2 acre. And some people wanted it to be just underneath 1 acre because there are lots of properties that are in that 0.97, 0.99 acres. So they wanted to be able to capture that for this possible proposal. There were requests to minimize requirements for permits in general and for all the things that are necessary in the parking pads, so the essential services, basically, in order to reduce as many barriers as possible. They want this to be easy. There were some clarifications about tiny homes as RVs. There are a few people who are Gesundheit. Experts in this field already in other locations, so they just provided some helpful examples of how they've gone through this. Similarly, some people provided explanations of options for how to winterize an RV, because that was a discussion that arose in one of the hearings of just, what happens in the winter. A few people responded to staff's inquiry. They said that there was not really a need to require storage in the code. This was one of the things that we kind of put out to the public that we wanted input on. So we received it. Thank you. People didn't think that there was a need for us to require storage or to require fencing or screening from neighboring properties. Similarly, people stated that there isn't any need to provide or have any rent maximums. This was an option that was provided in Senate Bill 1013. It was not included in the draft amendments, but we did bring it to everybody's attention because this is a potential avenue that the Planning Commission or the board could recommend. People did not seem to be super into it. There was some support for having some type of setback from neighboring properties, some way to address that buffer or not having things kind of right up against your neighbor. So that's a general summary of all the supporters. We did receive, thank you, next slide, or this is the right slide, some agency testimony. We put out a call to most of the fire marshals in the area, and we received comment from several of them. And this is just sort of a laundry list of various suggestions they provided. Some are very specific, some are just kind of conceptual. They requested to maintain fire access to the RV dwelling, require a 5-foot non-combustible ground cover around that RV. So essentially a mini defensible space. Some suggested that any fire requirements that applied to ADUs should also apply to RVs. Some agreed that the 10-foot distance between the RV and any other structure is reasonable. That's already in the draft. That came from our building safety division, but the fire department gave us the thumbs up on that one. There was a suggestion that all exterior portions of the RV should be within 100 feet of the fire apparatus access lane. Some had to do with things that would not necessarily be addressed in the zoning, such as requirements for fire extinguishers, circuit breakers, smoke and CO2 alarms. Duly noted. That isn't something that we would put in the zoning, but that would be addressed at a later point in this process and in the actual implementation. Access road should have an all-weather surface and not just dirt. And lastly, there were a few suggestions about addressing. They want to make sure that the addressing procedures for RVs would be clarified, mostly for emergency purposes. We got some stories of, fires in RVs that are perhaps not supposed to be there, and it's very difficult to tell for the emergency crews to know where to go. From the county, we also reached out to a lot of our internal divisions within community development. In terms of the facilities, both the building safety and the on-site wastewater departments divisions underscored the need that RVs should include facilities for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. So a toilet, sink, and a shower or tub, similar to any other type of dwelling. They stressed, and especially our on-site wastewater division, that these are supposed to be, homes for people who are living there essentially permanently. Even though they're rentals, but they're supposed to be, a place where people are putting down their stuff. This is where they live. They go to their job. So why shouldn't it have all the requirements in terms of sanitary items that any other dwelling would have? So they felt pretty strongly about that. The draft code requires there to be a toilet and sink. That was added by staff per discussion about this, but they just wanted to underscore that. As far as lot size, our on-site wastewater division did note that there's some potential complications and difficulties with a half-acre minimum rather than a 1 acre minimum. There's a kind of a complex matrix of DEQ rule and minimums and maximums for a septic capacity. And they noted that because of this, the confluence of this particular size of lot between half acre and 1 acre, and the minimum required size of a septic system, this could result in a lot of those smaller properties just being automatically picked out and not eligible for additional septic. So it would be the rejection of RVs on these type of properties. So they express some hesitation in having that lower minimum lot size. Their letters are in the record.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a quick clarification question on that. Are they saying that even if we were to say, let's just make it 0.97, then people would be confused because they would run into problems with their septic process, even if we allowed it? Like the septic?
I think, if I'm understanding correctly, their hesitation was more on the half acre side of things rather than a 0.97, because that, and it is very complicated. So if we, basically, the way I understand it is DEQ has certain laws for properties between half an acre and 1 acre that have certain types of soils, like the bad soils. And basically the entire septic capacity on those lots is already eaten up by the primary dwelling, because there's a minimum size as well. Whether you have 4 bedrooms or 1 bedrooms, you have to kind of have that minimum. So those same things intersect. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And then there wouldn't allow for any additional capacity to be built for a septic on those types of lots. So it's kind of just automatically kicked out of that system.
So just to clarify though, so even if the Board of County Commissioners changed this language to 0.97, it wouldn't necessarily help those people because they run into trouble with DEQ with the septic.
0.97, those are, because it's so close to 1 acre, there's more capacity in the lot. It depends.
Okay, so some people would be able to, they would assess that and they would.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a quick question on that. Have you guys considered all the lots in Oregon Water Wonderland 2, which has an actual sewer system? It's all half-acre lots, but it actually has a sewer and water system. So it wouldn't be affected by septic feasibility at all.
That could
So
be
we would
something that the commission could suggest, is say, write in an exception, the lot size is X, unless there's already a sewer in place or something to that nature.
I think that's just something to add in there, because I get the septic, especially when you get down to half acre, you start to run out of room unless you have an ATT system connected to a sand mound. But if you have an actual system, I think that definitely should be considered as part of that, not just blanket prohibit it from a neighborhood that's got that benefit.
Great point. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna continue on. Deschutes County 911 also weighed in. It's fairly similar to a lot of the things, the addressing components that the fire districts wrote in about. They wanted addressing to be consistent, for signs to be posted properly, and that the RV pad be identified on the site plan. And staff notes here, and I believe in the memo, that we are going to propose some amendments to the addressing code. They're not in this packet, but we will do that. And there's been already some coordination between 911 and some of the fire districts and our staff that works on addressing. And so that'll be part of the next wave of amendments for the board. So we're on that already. So now with that, I'm going to go on to the issues for deliberation. I've highlighted several issue areas based on the testimony received and the things that essentially elevated. It's up to the chair how and when to address each component. I'm just providing these as a guideline. The PC can also choose to deliberate on anything. These are just highlights that bubbled up. So, all right, the first one is just very conceptual. Very large. Does the planning commission recommend to the board? And remember, these deliberations are ultimately a recommendation to the board, not an actual approval or disapproval. Does the planning commission recommend to the board that RVs as rental dwellings should be allowed in rural residential exception areas pursuant to Senate Bill 1013 and subject to certain additional standards? If the answer is yes, we would go to the next several items, which do hone in on a few of those issues that we spoke of just now. If no, we don't, and that's where it ends. So, you don't have to have the perfect package in mind if you're in support of this. That will have subsequent questions, but first we're just gauging the planning commission interest on general yes or general no.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Hovkamp.
can I ask a quick clarification. Sorry to interrupt your flow on this deliberation matrix. Tanya, thank you for your indulgence. Two quick questions. First, I just want to clarify, I think I know the answer to this, but Senate Bill 1013 was enabling legislation. There's nothing about it that compels localities to consider RVs as rentals. Okay. So this allows us to consider it. Okay. And then there is logically here a third possibility in regard to your question one, right? I mean, we can make a recommendation, yes, to approve them. We can make a recommendation to the board of no, they shouldn't be approved, or we can make no recommendation.
That is true.
Is that,
No recommendation.
I mean, are we, is it,
Really, the procedure is to provide some sort of recommendation. But I guess you could.
Okay.
Caught a little
right.
unawares, but in theory,
Madam Chair, I would be inclined to lean on the planning commission to make a recommendation. I mean, or at the very least, exhaust yourselves to the limit to where it was demonstrated that you just couldn't get there. I mean, I think the board really values the recommendations, however nuanced or complex they are, because of the value that it represents as they eventually go through a de novo public hearing. And the vetting, while it can seem thankless at times and maybe unsatisfying, the vetting that you do in these initial hearings is invaluable as these legislative matters get closer to the decision makers for the potential for adoption. So technically, Tanya's right. You don't have to make a recommendation, but I would be leaning on you to do so and to try to do everything we could to give you the resources or the information so that you could find yourself in that area where you could offer those observations to the board.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would actually offer there's potentially a fourth option. And that would be if the body chose not to recommend this, I still think it would behoove us to identify what conditions we would recommend if the Board of Commissioners chose to go ahead without it or over the objection.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Thanks.
And
You're welcome.
and I'm also curious, I have kind of some, I kind of have an answer to this question, but I would be open to discussion also, just to see what my colleagues have to say, and I might change my mind, based on that. So I'm
Mhm.
kind of curious there too.
Mhm. And that's why we will be deliberating.
And as an option, if I may, as an option, also, let's say everyone says, let's say the vote is no or something on this one, and then we discuss it at length, and then everyone's like, I want to change my vote. I'm going yes on this. Then we could rescind the previous
Mhm.
vote if we had our 2/3 majority. So like, I mean, it could even go back to a yes after the whole conversation is, it would just take a 2/3 instead of a majority. So a few more, like it would really, the group would really have to mean it. But also I suppose the group could vote to, or I mean, staff could, yeah, there's probably all kinds of different ways that you could end up with like, well, it was unanimous no before, and then after they talked about it for a while, they ended up sort of split, like 3 wanted to go and 4 didn't. So that would still carry forward some information to the board also.
Yeah, and I think, and correct me, Robert's rules people, if I'm wrong, but I think the planning commission has the flexibility to discuss before kind of committing to a motion. You can toss it around a bit amongst yourselves.
Technically no, but sure, it's up to the chair now. No longer my decision.
And I might just add too that our commissioner, our former chair, Jessica Karas, and her predecessors in the past on these complex text amendments have with the support of their colleagues attended the public hearing before the board to they, with the requisite disclaimer, I'm just one planning commissioner and as the chair, but felt compelled with the support of my colleagues to share with you or to recap the decision that we made on issue X and why it was so nuanced, or why it was made in the way that is being communicated by staff. So to Chair Williams, you always have that option too. It's not mandatory, but for these projects that have some real complexity to them, it certainly is a value added communication that I think the board appreciates, and it supplements staff's recap.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Got one more, sorry, just to follow up on my original question now, after all these great points. When the legislature passes enabling legislation, we're not compelled to follow what that enabling legislation provides for. Are we compelled to even consider it? Or where did, I guess more to the point, did this come from, the direction come from the county commission that we take this up? Was this staff, or where was the direction to take up this as a possibility?
You want me to respond? You are correct. It is what's called a permissive bill.
Right.
So there is no obligation for any county in Oregon to implement it. My understanding is it came from a legislator experience. I can't remember where this particular legislator resided. He was getting a degree, I thought, in dentistry, and found that it was in a situation, he was personally experiencing a situation where it was very hard for him to find housing affordably as based on his own life's journey. So he was the sponsor of the bill. And I think in the regular session, given our housing challenges, it was widely received and then refined through the legislative process. Initially, it was proposed as being mandatory, and then you can imagine the Association of Oregon Counties came out and respectfully asked that it be a permissive bill. So it didn't come from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. It didn't certainly come from Deschutes County. It was a particular legislator that offered this, what it was what is now codified in laws as an opportunity to be considered at the local level.
Thanks, Peter. That's the word I was looking for, permissive.
Yeah,
not
it's
enabling.
permissive. Yeah.
And the answer to the second part of that question, this is coming from the board, or this is coming?
Board directed us. Deschutes County often finds themselves, we find ourselves always embracing new opportunities as it pertains to land use, just based on how limiting the state enabling planning legislation can be for rural counties. So this was a bill that we were tracking. Actually, tomorrow morning, department heads will be engaging the Board of County Commissioners and our lobbyists to track the short session. So this bill was identified. It was brought to the board's attention. It wasn't a priority bill for them. I think the board was supportive, but didn't expend any real capital during the legislative process. I'm giving more than you want. But once it was enacted into law, with Will's leadership, we felt compelled to alert the board to this opportunity, and through those conversations, through our work plan and reprioritizing, the board directed staff to initiate an amendment to receive public testimony on this opportunity.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would move to move forward with a recommendation that the county adopt this proposal.
Second that.
Allowing rural residential RV rentals.
I still second it, even though I seconded halfway through your sentence.
So at this point, Commissioner Cyrus, what is the reasoning behind your motion?
Well, because quite frankly, in order to have a discussion that we're having, we need to have something on the table.
Okay.
I've seen quite a bit of compelling testimony on both sides. And at this point, I'm neutral, but we can't have a discussion without having a motion on the table. So I would love to hear from my colleagues on what their thoughts were. I mean, at this point, I can see compelling arguments both directions. And I would love to hear what everyone else thinks.
And do we have to all vote right now, or can we then discuss and then vote?
Now we
Okay.
now we deliberate, and you pick who goes, someone will motion to they want to speak, and then
Okay.
you decide.
Technically, we were mostly out of order with all the discussion we had prior to having a motion on the table.
Okay. And would anyone like to discuss?
I'll
Vice Chair
discuss.
Curris?
So like Commissioner Cyrus, I've found myself on the fence on this one and doing a lot of what I call rumination, thinking about things, thinking about all of the public testimony, thinking about all the pros and cons, and what it boils down to for me, and why I plan to support the motion, is that given how on the fence I am, and how many good arguments there are before and against, I feel like for me to limit what somebody can do on their property that affects potential for someone else to have a place to live, I would have to have really good reasons on the side to oppose this. And it just occurred to me, if I'm this ambivalent, that's not reason enough for me to vote against something that could give somebody a place to live. So that's why I plan to support the motion. But like Commissioner Cyrus, I'm very interested and eager to hear what other people think.
Commissioner Hofkamp, anything to say?
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. This has been a difficult issue for me, for some of the reasons that my colleagues have already highlighted. There's compelling testimony that we have access to, good points, pro and con. I thought about, if I were in a similar situation, or individuals that I've known that have been in a similar situation looking for housing, thought about the impacts on the landscape. I guess on balance, I'm not going to support the motion. When I look at the arguments summarized for us, thank you, staff. And I consider what I've seen in Deschutes County over my almost 30 years here and the rash of structures and development in the rural area, notwithstanding that 75-80% of Deschutes County's public lands, even those now are impacted by temporary dwellings and shelters. And when I look at maps, time-lapse maps of the development in Deschutes County, I think it probably highest of all 36 counties in the state is a poster child for exemptions and exceptions that have allowed for increasing impacts in the rural areas. So while I'm sympathetic to some of the challenges that we face in regards to housing, this feels a little bit rushed to me. When I think about all of the thinking that went into the work that resulted in, I think first it was Senate Bill 10 and then Senate Bill 100, that these guys know a lot more about than I do. And all of the opportunity to shape those bills that resulted in the statewide land use planning system. That is the reason that we're all here in this body. It created these kinds of bodies and these processes. There were, I'm sure that there was a lot more thought given to these kinds of issues, and I just don't feel comfortable with the potential for 15,000 RVs on the landscape in rural Deschutes County. I believe it's around 15,000 if you combine the 12,000 and some that currently have a structure on them, and I think around 2,000 and some, rounds up to about 15,000 or so lots. If they're an acre, and if we're considering dropping below an acre, that's hundreds and hundreds more, potentially thousands more. And I'm just compelled on balance by the arguments in opposition. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Commissioner Altman, do you have input?
I do. Thank you. I'm actually in agreement with Commissioner Hofkamp. I would not be supporting the motion. I had asked Tanya to please look into permits that had been, I don't know what the terminology is, submitted, open, whatever, in 2023 for the county and then the 4 cities. I didn't get the numbers for Bend, but for the county, Lapine, Redmond, and Sisters, it was 1388 for new addition or accessory dwellings. And I would just take a guess. I would say maybe Bend would be that number just by itself. I have no idea because that didn't come through. So in addition to what Commissioner Hofkamp was saying, let's say within the county, there would be 2,500 permits. And now we're looking at potentially 15,000. I mean, I know not everybody's going to put an RV on their property, but that is a huge population increase in the rural areas. And I don't think that we should have that much of a population increase in the rural areas. Lack of code enforcement. I know that was a big issue for a lot of people who provided testimony. I'd asked Tanya how many code enforcement people are in the CDD. She said 1 manager, supervisor, I don't know the terminology, and 3 other employees who already have a backlog, and there's no plan to add additional people at this time. People wrote about increased wildlife incidents. If we know that a huge amount of mule deer are lost due to traffic incidents, and we increase the population of people driving around the county, that's increased loss of wildlife, specifically mule deer. It's not in the code as written, I don't believe, although it could be possible per my communication with Tanya, that's in the record, that right now there are no additional SDCs planned for this usage, or I would imagine additional property taxes. So we're increasing the potential road usage and emergency services without additional funds to cover those costs. I think that housing, I agree with Commissioner Hofkamp that this feels very rushed, and housing is obviously a problem. I also was very much on the fence. I mean, I can see both sides. I can see everybody's argument. But I think that rushing this and potentially increasing the density of rural lands, housing on rural lands, is just, it's not something that should be addressed by the county, and people need to be in proximity to their jobs. And I don't think that belongs on rural land. So I would not support this.
Thank you. And Commissioner Kelly.
Commissioner, is my, yeah, it's hot. Commissioner Altman, you spoke very similar to what has been going. This has been really hard for me too, because man, we heard so many great testimony over a couple hearings about people who this really affects their lives in really positive ways by providing stable housing, by providing opportunities to save money to afford housing in our, unaffordable landscape here. And man, they really tugged at my heartstrings, and I understood where they were, I really saw them. And so I was really conflicted, because then I'm also, a real component for providing denser housing near amenities. And when we encourage and support these RVs on rural land, it's conflicting with my, core belief that denser, we should be promoting denser housing near closer to our cities. So I also am in opposition of this. The lack of code enforcement bugs me too, because it's putting the onus on neighbors to report each other. And I think that just creates a really not a hospitable, neighborly attitude either. And what happens when it's reported? It sounds like not much. So then why are we going to put together a code where we can't even enforce it? So that's conflicting for me too. But I do think that I'm not saying that RVs and tiny homes are not a great solution for housing. I just don't think they belong on rural lands. I would be, stoked to see the county look into other opportunities for, RV parks. I know where a lot of mobile home parks have been put into different type of housing, but I don't see any new mobile home park going in. So I see this as a good solution. I just don't see the solution as being on rural lands. I see it as being closer to amenities, and I'd be stoked to see the county address that instead of this. I think that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. And Commissioner Trowbridge.
Yes, I have some thoughts. One of my questions, I hear a lot of concern about the rural nature of the county being destroyed by people just looking for an affordable place to live. I have a question for planners. Do you guys know what percentage of RR10 zone properties are actually even 10 acres? I know there's a lot of them that are actually under 1 acre. Do you guys know anything about that off the top of your head as far as planning?
Top of my head, I can't say I do.
There's a lot. I know just off the top of my head, there's probably at least several thousand properties that are zoned RR10 that are actually probably under 2 acres. And then combine that to maybe SR 2.5, which that zoning I think is pretty close to city limits. And a lot of those smaller RR10 properties are close to city limits that are easy to access jobs in the city. And I think that's something that we need to look at. I agree this is something that should not be just shot down. Because I know like all of us here deliberating on this, we all have a place to live, and that's something we need to think about. And I 100% agree with protecting the rural nature of the county. but we're not talking about EFU zone. We're not talking about resource zone, which I 100% agree. We should never touch that. That's sacred. But when we're talking about RR10 and SR 2.5, and I think the West Side Transect zone, I think most of that is protected by CC&R. So it's not, I don't know how much of that really would be even a factor here. But I think that, I think we need to have this conversation open. I don't think it's an easy, let's just shove them into RV parks, because I don't know if any of you realize pretty much any RV park that is in the city is full, with probably years worth of waiting lists. So there are things that aren't just easy answers like, hey, let's just put it on the city. I think that the county has a role in this, lack of affordable housing. I don't think it's an easy yes or no. I think it's a let's take this thing and really dissect it. And I don't think we need to rush it either way, no or yes. I think we could make reasonable decisions on this and give a good path to commissioners to make a decision on this. Like I was talking about, just hey, let's just lay a acreage size. No, let's stop and step back and look at which subdivisions or acreages will work. Like the half acre, we should allow it, or at least explore allowing it in a neighborhood that might be smaller lots, but it has a sewer system and it's in the county. That works. In the city, you can have an ADU or whatever, an accessory dwelling on a 3,000 foot lot. So it's not going to be a situation where you're going to ruin the neighbor's quality of life. But anyway, not getting into details, I think that it's something that we need to talk about and not just say no, because we're concerned about our personal situation. We are all comfortable. I live on 24 acres. I love it. I live on it because I like space. And I'm sure everyone else does. But I also am thinking about people that aren't as fortunate as we are. And I don't think we can just make it that easy of a decision. And frankly, I care about people more than I care about deer. So that's another thing. I keep hearing about deer are so important, which they are, but people that serve us food and clean houses and do whatever, basic jobs, they have a place in our community, and they're not all going to live in micro apartments and RV parks and be jammed into these convenient situations inside of the city limits. And I'm not saying by any means that this or rural ADUs are going to solve the problem. All they are is a little bit of a pressure release. That's all we're talking about here. And the reality is most people that will have this opportunity will probably not take advantage of it. And those that do, if I were to allow that on my property, I'm not going to have some riffraff on there. We're going to have a lot of the people that have testified, the young couple in the tiny house, or the people working their way through college or whatever it is they're doing, trying to save money to better themselves. That is who we're going to help more than anything. We're not going to suddenly have the China Hat Road people move on to people's properties. That's not going to be the rule. That, if anything, that would be the exception in certain cases. So anyway, I am 100% for keeping this on the table and breaking it down and figuring out a way to make it work so that we can help people. And that's it. I'm done.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Cyrus?
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate the comments I've heard from everyone. Commissioner Trowbridge and Karis make good points about allowing housing. My personal, I think it certainly helps and creates opportunities the ADUs that we supported previously are going to be expensive. And the rentals, I mean, when those things go out for rental, they'll be in the thousands per month, as opposed to something with, if somebody's got an RV and a place to park it, and a willing person to allow them to put it, could certainly help with some of the housing issues that we're having right now. A couple of the concerns I have and would need to be addressed is whether if we move forward with this, I think there needs to be some restrictions on expansion of exempt wells. It should fall under the existing exempt well restrictions, so it doesn't expand that. The other one, probably my single biggest concern about this whole process, and that boils down to public services and tax revenue. Put my other hat on from the fire standpoint, and is the fact that these are personal property items as opposed to real property. And so there is no property tax or real property tax that goes to support fire and sheriff and some of those services who are going to be directly impacted by the extra rural population. And that was one of the things that was brought up by one of the fire departments, was the fact that there's no provision for additional revenue to offset the cost of the additional services. And for me, that is the single biggest part I'm trying to wrestle with, is how we resolve that. You've got schools, fire, and police are the three areas that are going to be most impacted without a revenue source to cover those impacts. And I would be certainly much more supportive of this if we could resolve that, and maybe Peter or Tanya or somebody has a potential solution to how we deal with that, be it maybe an annual renewable permit or fee that were to go directed toward those in lieu of taxes. But that, to me, is the single biggest hurdle and stumbling block on this process, is how those additional people cover the cost of the services that they're going to require.
So at this point, I'm going to say you're a plus minus.
I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
I have one more quick thing to add as far as the taxable. I think when this starts to happen, the assessors can come out or they could determine a value of the, once you permit a permanent RV site, the tax assessors are going to know about this and they're going to come assess it. So, and I don't know if that's exactly going to translate to enough money, but they may be able to come up with a formula where, okay, you put a rural RV site on your property, we are going to tax that at X. And they're definitely going to put a value to it. Like, what is it worth? And I think a way to value it is, okay, what's a fair market value for this space? And then you can do a capitalization rate and figure out what the value, and then plug it into the tax assessor program. So I think that could be a question answered possibly from the assessor, how they would look at this RV site, because it's going to be done with a permit. When you do a improvement on your property, when it hits a certain value, if it crests a certain value, and I'm not even sure what it is exactly, but I built an art studio on my property and it ended up having a permit value of, I think, over like $50,000, and they were able to reassess the entire property. Granted, an RV space probably wouldn't trigger that, but it will trigger a tax increase, I'm sure, and I think it should. So that could be a way to solve that problem.
If I may,
Yes.
the assessor did submit something into the record concerning this very topic, and he noted that as Commissioner Cyrus noted, the RV itself is not real property. The improvements that a property owner does to make the pad, so the electrical pedestal, the hookups, all of that, whatever they're putting in there to the property, that could trigger an increase. If it's, I believe this year it's about $18,500, something in that universe. So if it's above that threshold, it could potentially generate an increase to the real property value, but that's just for the improvements they do to their property. The RV itself would not be considered, as you noted, Commissioner Cyrus, an increase that would not generate additional property taxes, just the pad. But they could do a really nice pad.
Well, they could come up with couldn't they come up with a formula like, okay, if this pad is used, there is this impact. Like, what happens if you add an extra bedroom to your house? Essentially, that's gonna, not exactly, because it could be a family, but I see it more along those lines, because I do think that there should be, there's going to be an added impact. There's no denying that. And some are going to be higher and some are going to be lower, but there has to be some sort of a way to measure that and make sure that the county can cover that. And it doesn't matter what the RV is personal property. I get that. That's out of I think that needs to be removed from the equation. It has to be all about the pad. So a $500,000 RV could sit there, and that's probably going to have the lowest impact to county. And then it's all about the pad. It's about the opportunity to put this living situation in that location. So I think it has to be based on that, not the actual unit that's sitting there.
Madam Chair, I'm certainly, the comment that I would offer for the Planning Commission is not to put any kind of weight on the discussion as to whether or not to proceed with this amendment in terms of, recommending support or if the majority recommends denial. One thought that came to mind, and again, there's a lot to think about here, and the Planning Commission, after 2.5+ hours starts to feel the weight of the evening. And so we can certainly come back and continue these conversations during deliberations. But, one thought is you could consider a cap and a cap of, 250, 500, 1,000. It built into the amendment. I'm not here I just introduced this as a concept, but if there's concerns about the number of eligible lots, which there are thousands, as Commissioner Altman noted, and concerns about the implications it has on rural fire protection districts, on the environment, one could consider a cap that then, before it can be changed, the code could be written to say, it would require a new text amendment, and the Planning Commission could offer responses that note, there needs to be community conversations, there needs to be an in-depth discussion about what the lessons learned are from whatever that cap is, and that cap could, if it was a successful program or there are trials and tribulations, that could be duly noted and the program could be modified over time. Now, if you provide a cap, those that receive that permit, that would run with the land. And so it would be very difficult you could eliminate the program, but they have a vested right to be a legal non-conforming use. So I just offer that as a concept. I don't think, Tanya, we've ever introduced it. But, and I look to Will, and Will's kind of shaking his head in his affirmative, that is something that you could contemplate. But again, we're throwing this at you at 7:30, and you're really, and I really appreciate this, as your planning director. This is very complicated, and we're the first county that's exploring it. It has wide potential applications. So I'm just giving all of you a lot of credit for sharing those thoughts and perspectives, because it's it's a very difficult land use to consider in our county. It might be different if you were in a very rural county east of us, right, which doesn't have a lot of rural residential exception lands. In Deschutes County, we have a lot. So that's why the gravity of this amendment is duly noted on all of us. So just wanted to offer that observation to the extent that that's meaningful.
So I can give my thoughts, or did you have something to say, Vice Chair?
Just a quick note, since in reference to Commissioner Trowbridge's comment, and then also what Mr. Gutowski just said, that it is possible to postpone to a certain time if we're in the middle of a debate and we want to put off taking a vote on it. I'm not saying that that's my preference. I feel pretty good about how I'm going to vote, but you know, just to note that that is an option that people have.
Absolutely. I've really been on the fence about this one as well. I understand we have a need for housing. I cannot fathom, though, anyone that is already allowing people to illegally live in RVs on their property. I cannot fathom them just running down to get permits and make all of this legal. I just don't see that happening. Everyone already has an RV in their rural property, whether or not it's being lived in or not. So we have RVs. They exist in the rural area, and they sit out on lots, and everyone can see them. I just really feel, and Peter actually points this out, this was really just, I feel, just thrown at us. I felt like I was just like, whoa, what happened? Where did this come from? And of course, you know, Deschutes County loves to be the trailblazer. Let us mess everything up, and the other counties can learn from it. So in that respect, I think there needs to be a lot more sussing out of this possibility, because it has a lot of positive implications. It has a lot of negative implications. And I'm not comfortable making a good recommendation for this. I'm not ready for it. I think we just jumped into the deep end and we didn't even have our swimmies on. So that is my thoughts at this point. I would lead towards saying no, only because I just don't feel we've done enough homework on it. We've gotten through enough of it, and you know, we just passed the ADUs, and that was very contentious. And we haven't even seen how that's playing out. And all, yes, that's a whole lot more property value, a lot more expensive. But it's like one thing at a time. And if we were to recommend no, it's not a no forever. We could reintroduce it. So, but if we say yes, it's a lot harder to pull it back once it's on the books, if I understand all our good county codes. So I just want to make sure that we take enough time to really understand all the implications that this has. And I agree with some neighborhoods that don't have trash service. I live in a rural area. We have trash service, but a lot of people don't utilize it. And I see, you know, empty pickup trucks, and then the back of the pickup truck gets fuller and fuller and fuller. And we're going to see that happen. So I would be inclined to vote no right now.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a question for Peter. And I guess that would be, what would be the implications if we were to, say, postpone this topic in general for, say, 6 months or a year, and basically just sit on it and stew on it, and, you know, give some more thought and deliberation to this, and readdress it later. Not necessarily give a recommendation either direction, but just postpone it.
That's certainly an option. I mean, you'd be postponing your deliberation. I would, I mean, it's an option. I think the better approach would be to the extent that there's a majority of the planning commission that finds for reasons that have been well articulated about the concerns of this amendment and the implications, and the unknowns, and the sweeping effects potentially. I think the better approach would be to make that recommendation to the board. You know, recommend denial it, or, you know, not denial, not support. You know, you could soften the denial language, for the reasons that have been articulated this evening. The importance of potentially convening a steering, you know, we have a lot on this team's work plan. So essentially you would make a recommendation of denial for reasons that are well articulated. We would go to the board and communicate those perspectives, as well as the minority perspectives that are also quite articulate, and let the board, you know, think about the implications of your recommendation. And if the board found that they wanted to table it, they could for 6 to 12 months. You know, to the extent that there's a majority that feels that the timing is not right, there's too many unknowns. But, you know, there's other statements that could be forwarded to the board about allowing other counties to lead this effort and to have lessons learned, to know how garbage, rural fire protection district, you know, accommodations, etc., are being addressed. And once those are better understood, to then reconvene a community conversation and potentially a new text amendment. So I think that's that's a long-winded way of saying I think that's the better approach, to put it to the board with as much information or opinions that you have, both in terms of the majority and minority positions. And then Tanya can carry that to the board and let them really think about what the next steps look like. Of course, if they want to go forward, they can. That's their prerogative as decision makers, as elected officials. But I think I can say, and I would look to Will to provide in more detail, we don't have the ability to kind of table this and I think revisit it again in any kind of extensive community dialogue with all the other projects that we have that we're undertaking at the moment. So doesn't mean that the board couldn't reshuffle the chairs on the deck. They could, but that would be my suggestion as you grapple with this ultimate recommendation to the board.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
let me add one other option, which is if this motion fails, then somebody could also make a motion to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners that we postpone the process, or recommend that they postpone the process. So, I mean, if that's something you felt strongly about, you could always say, hey, we recommended the board that they don't do this right now and that they take more time for more whatevering. So again, I'm not putting that forward as my recommendation or something I would necessarily say, but just to try to give you another avenue if that's what if you're wanting that. That to me would make a lot more sense than just not giving the board any recommendation. That makes me very uncomfortable because they appointed us to do something, to recommend things to them. So to me, it's a little bit like to say, okay, thanks for the job, but I'm not going to do it, is a little bit uncomfortable for me. So I would rather recommend to them something to the effect of maybe a majority of people think we should wait on this item, and that's what we are asking them to do, if that's how people feel.
So I'd call for the question.
Alrighty. And Commissioner Cyrus, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Commissioner Hovkamp.
Could I request a brief summary of the motion, please?
The motion was to approve the RVs as dwelling units.
Okay, thank you. I vote no.
Vice Chair Curtis,
I'll vote yes.
Commissioner Altman,
I vote no.
Commissioner Kelly, Commissioner Trowbridge.
Absolutely, yes.
Alrighty, and I will vote no. At this point, we have 4 noes and 3 yeses on RVs as rural rental units.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
with respect to comments that the staff has answered a couple of times, thanks Peter for taking a couple bites at apple about the nature of an alternative motion. I'd like to offer a motion.
Yes.
So that as Director Katowski has mentioned, that so that the board has some guidance where we stand instead of no motion at all. I'll take a swing at this and move that we recommend to the Board of County Commissioners that RVs as rental dwellings should not be allowed in rural exception areas, RR 10, MUA 10, UAR 10, SR 2.5, and West Side Transect Zone pursuant to SB 1013 and subject to certain additional standards.
So I think with our 4 no, 3 yes vote, that's basically what we just did.
That's not what I was hearing from staff, because we were essentially that with that motion failing, we're making no recommendation.
No,
We're recommending not to move forward.
That's
So-
what my motion is. That's what my motion is. I'm really confident of this. Right now, we have no recommendation.
So actually, just real quick. So the blue B says if it's a no vote, staff will forward a no recommendation to the board. That's what it says on the screen here.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Your Planning Manager, Will Groves. I can see the discussion and the confusion. What we have taken away from your previous vote, and unless further clarified, is that 4 of you have said, and thus the majority, that this should not proceed at this time. Full stop.
Okay, then I'll withdraw the motion. Thanks.
Would we like to, even though we have a 4-3 no vote, would we like to proceed with answering the questions in the event that the board does decide to move forward with this? And that would be questions, I think, like 2 to 4 or 2 to 5, Tanya?
Yes, those are questions that staff has raised. The planning commission can raise.
I think it would be prudent,
I do as well.
because then if the Board of Commissioners just chooses to move forward anyway, at least then we would at least have some suggested sideboards.
And would we like to do this now, or would we like to hold that part of the deliberation at the next meeting?
Let's keep it rolling.
we could also start and at some point somebody could move to continue deliberations at another time. That's another option.
I would say that if we have a little juice, there's not a lot of questions. I don't think there will be a ton of discussion. We have the no, but this will, if the board decides to move forward, it will give them the groundwork of what we are comfortable with if they go against the recommendation. And then we can postpone the ending of it. But I think the matrix will be quite big next time.
So, Madam Chair,
We will take a no more than 5-minute break.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes,
I would move under 2 that we adopt the current draft recommendations, but allow for a up to 10% variance for size.
That would be like 0.9 to 1.1.
Right. If somebody had a compelling argument, they could apply for a variance for it.
Up to 10%. Is that where? the mo-
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
up to 10% variance.
Okay. I'll second that.
okay. And any discussion?
Yeah, I just, based on the discussion, based on the comments from the solid waste folks, or actually not solid waste, but the septic folks, I think it makes sense to allow for some variance. I think we're starting to you start getting too small, you start creating problems for everything. I mean, certainly there's sewer exceptions and some other different things. Hence the whole idea of allowing for a variance for the 0.95 and some of those other marginal lot sizes, rather than that was my thought with create the 1 acre minimum, but allow for a variance for extenuating circumstances.
Were you here, Commissioner Trowbridge, for our startup?
It did not turn on. It just turned on about 10 seconds ago for me.
Okay, under item 2, Commissioner Cyrus recommended minimum acreage as a current draft amendment, 1 acre with a 10% variance. That would help include some of the 0.97, 0.95 acre properties.
But the state did not have a lot size minimum, correct?
No, they do not.
They did not. So we're adding that, correct? A blanket adding 1 acre.
Correct, and that is based, I believe, on our on-site wastewater department's recommendation.
And then that's not considering neighborhoods that happen to have a sewer system, correct? We're going to just disregard that, or are we going to at a certain point consider that, or are we just going to blanket prohibit that and then require
It could be considered, it could be a friendly,
a
but we
what?
haven't had a second yet on the,
seconded.
oh, okay.
But yeah, it's okay.
We could do a friendly amendment. We have just at this point had a motion and a second on the 1 acre minimum, 10%
Okay.
variance.
Okay.
And just to your question, like, we haven't actually like decided anything yet. So the idea is it's all up for discussion. So
Okay. So also to be clear, so we decided to not do this, to say no to this, but now we're actually going to put in our opinion after saying no, correct?
Correct. In the event that the Board of County Commissioners decides to move forward with it, we would like them to know our recommendations if they go against commission recommendation of no.
So we want to do both. We want to say no, but we also want an opinion in it. It seems like we're choosing both then. Is that what we're doing?
Madam Chair, so I would like to proceed with this process because my experience on the Planning Commission has been that the Board of County Commissioners sometimes feels differently about these decisions than the commission does. And I feel that our job is to give them as much information as we can. And so doubtlessly, some commissioners will probably vote. There'll be a variety of votes, for instance, on this motion. And that will give valuable information to the board. What if they find out we all like the 1 acre size? Or what if they find out that none of us like the 1 acre size? So that may influence how they decide to implement this idea if they do decide to do that. And so we want to have as much input as possible. This is an opportunity for that.
But we've let them know that we're a no matter what the details are, right?
Well, we had a split vote, so some people voted yes and some people voted no, and they'll get that from our planning staff as well. So
Okay.
we need to give them a recommendation. Yes, we did recommend no, but they will have a public hearing as well. There will be input. And this is not the first time that we have given a no recommendation, yet still outlined what we think we would like them to do should they go against the recommendation. And if you would like to discuss that you think Seward communities that are smaller than an acre be added as an exception, we can discuss that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with earlier where we were saying that it probably shouldn't be a rushed decision. I think there's so many nuances that need to be discussed that a lot of people don't understand that could actually end up positive. And yeah, so what you guys are asking is if we support if I support the 1 acre minimum, is that the question? Because
With up to 10% variance. Oh, sorry.
Correct.
Yeah.
At this point, we're just discussing it. We made a motion so that we could discuss it.
Okay. So if I say
Chair Williams,
yes,
I was out of order.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I might help explain this just a little bit or suggest it, Commissioner Trowbridge, the discussion right now is whether or not to provide a 1 acre minimum. If you disagree with that or think there should be an exception for Seward lots, for example, it would certainly be appropriate to make an amendment to the motion to suggest that lots with sewers could be exempt from the minimum lot size.
okay, that makes sense. So I can suggest an amendment that we should at least have that conversation with Seward lots.
Yes, you can just
Okay.
make the amendment recommendation.
Okay, I would like to do that.
Okay, so you would like to amend it that it is a 1 acre minimum with a 10% variance, and those lots that are Seward are exempt from the 1 acre minimum. Is that correct?
I think that yes, but I think that we've skipped out on the 0.97, the hundreds of
That's the 10% variance.
So you have to apply for a variance if it's anything under 1 acre, correct?
No, we're adding a 10% variance, so you can
Oh,
be
okay. Yes.
0.9 or more.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I support that.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Sure, I'll second it.
All righty. Any further discussion?
So we're about to vote on the amendment, adding the amendment.
Yes, and I'd be glad to reread that.
I think you're good.
Okay. Commissioner Cyrus.
Are you looking for a vote
Yes.
or discussion?
No, vote.
I will vote yes.
Commissioner Hofkamp.
No.
Vice Chair Curris.
I'm also going to vote no.
Commissioner Altman.
Yes.
Commissioner Kelly.
I'm conflicted with the sewer. I'm trying to think of all the, I vote yes for the 1 acre with the 10%, and I'm struggling with the
So
sewer addition.
just to make sure everyone knows what we're voting on, we're only voting on whether or not we're going to add Commissioner Trowbridge's amendment to the motion or not.
Okay.
That's all that's being voted on right now.
Property would have to have an existing public sewer system. There's only one.
So after
neighbor-
this, we'll then vote on the main motion.
Commissioner Trowbridge.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. So we are now voting on the entirety of the motion, which is to have a 1 acre minimum as the current draft amendment with a 10% variance, and those lots that are Seward are exempted from the minimum acreage.
Question on the motion, if I can ask it.
Yes.
So I'm not clear what a variance means here. If we're saying a 10% variance automatically, then what we're saying is a 0.9 acre minimum, right?
Correct.
So the 1 acre minimum is kind of irrelevant. So what we're really saying is it's a 0.9 acre minimum. Is that right? Because I mean, a variance is something that has to be applied for.
Will?
Good point.
I think this is a callback to something that I said. So for those matters that are subject, they're local code. So things that don't come out of state law, like this question of acreage minimums, our code already allows a 10% variance to those numbers. So unless you expressly specify any otherwise, when you say there's a 1 acre minimum, what you mean is there's a 1 acre minimum and someone could come in under the variance procedures with an application to receive up to a 10% reduction in that. That 10%, that variance, minor variance criteria basically has some criteria that says, hey, is it actually a good idea here? Does it provide, the spirit of, I can read you the exact provisions, but does it basically, are there reasons, is it okay here specifically? Yes, it's a little bit smaller. Is it okay? So that's already going to be baked in. So, to the extent that you're looking, and Commissioner Trowbridge had asked, would they need to come in with a variance application? So the default would be, if you had just said we wanted a 1 acre minimum, it would be that variance would be available. If you're asking instead for some different variance procedure, like one that they didn't have to apply for, we'd have to talk, we would need a lot more instruction about what you meant by that.
Okay. I guess I was unaware that the county already has a procedure for that. I was just trying to allow for some leeway with regard to, like, say, fractional lots. So probably we don't even need that language in there, because I wasn't intending an automatic 0.9. My assumption is that they would have to go through a procedure or process. So the county would have some discretion to decide whether or not to go below the 1 acre.
Now I have another question.
I have a friendly, my first friendly, so bear with me. I'm kind of concerned that we need some kind of like no smaller than half an acre, or there'd be some kind of bottom to those sewer properties.
That was
Just-
that was
yeah.
part of the friendly amendment.
It just said any property that has septic.
We did not put a minimum size on it as far as I'm aware, and I only know South County. ODUB 2 is all about half acre minimums,
That is, yeah.
and River Meadows does not allow for RVs on site. They have their own offsite storage area. So South County, rural, not in a city limit. Those are the only two neighborhoods we really have.
I think it's really comes down.
Actually, if I might, the
up.
friendly would only be with relation to the original motion. And we've already voted on that topic. And I believe it passed that we would have actually created an exemption, a complete exemption for lot sizes for sewer lots. Is, I believe, what we just voted on.
That's why I voted no.
So do we have a minimum? Like, could someone just come in and say?
You just voted to not have a minimum for sewer lots.
But it's essentially half acre, because the
Yes, you
only
can always vote no.
neighborhood- the only neighborhood that has this situation is half acre lots. There is none that exists that are less than that.
I'd like to make a suggestion. I think it may be helpful for you to consider flushing this current vote by
Yes.
knowing it out and then staying out of a labyrinth of friendlies. And, what I might suggest, again, at your discretion, would be, one, do you want to generally have this 1 acre minimum? And then as a second question, ask if you want to have a special way of handling the sewer amendments, because I think we're about to go down into a Robert's Rules of Order hole.
So we
how
have
do
to
I-
vote on the motion.
Okay, let us vote on the motion, and I think we may want to, I'm just guessing we may want to scuttle it and start over. Can I say that?
Well, I would suggest that the motion on the table now is that there would be a 1 acre minimum with an exception for sewered lots, in which case they have no minimum.
I think they should.
That's the motion.
I think they should have them.
I think it could put the half acre
I'm
minimum.
gonna call the question.
Yes.
We voted on whether or not we wanted to add his amendment or not. That's what we
Oh,
voted
okay.
on.
That's all we voted on is the amendment.
So we just
Mhm.
need to vote and then we
Yes.
can keep it moving.
Commissioner Cyrus,
Vote yes.
Commissioner Hovkamp.
We're voting on the motion as amended.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to vote no.
Vice
Oh.
Chair,
I'll vote no as well.
I vote
Commissioner Altman. No. Commissioner Kelly, no. Commissioner Trowbridge.
Yes.
Okay, I will also vote no, and we will go back to the starting board. The reason we're doing this is to get some clarity on the exempted Seward lots.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm going to move that we adjourn for tonight and that we, this is a great discussion and I think it's an important one that we give it the justice it needs. I'm sorry, not adjourn the meeting, but rather that we move on from this particular discussion item is what I meant to say. And that we wrap up the meeting with what we still have on the agenda tonight. And we revisit this at another time, give staff some time to think about some recommendations to us. I think we've indicated, kind of where we're inclined in regards to a number of these issues, as well as the overriding overall issue. So that I would make that. Is that a motion or a recommendation to you, Madam Chair? Maybe just a recommendation to you.
I would move that we postpone deliberations until after the matrix of deliberations on comprehensive plan on January 25th.
I'll second that.
like
All righty. I think now we have,
Vote on the motion.
oh, okay, this is the true motion.
The chair actually could have
Just postpone it.
Yeah,
decided to do that on its own without a motion.
okay, that's what
But-
I meant to do.
But since you did make a motion, now we have to vote on it.
Okay, Cyrus,
I vote yes.
Hovkamp,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Altman,
yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Trowbridge.
No.
Yes, okay, 6 yes to postpone deliberations till next time and 1 to keep it going. All right, staff comments. And thank you, Tanya.
Thank you. So I will, just to sum it all up, I will be back at the next planning commission meeting for this continued discussion and deliberations. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, and Commissioners, I'll be very quick. I want to extend my appreciation to Commissioner Kiris and Commissioner Hovkamp for their leadership in 2023. You helped lead 22 meetings and appreciate your service and looking forward to collaborating with our new chair, our vice chair, and of course, all the planning commissioners as we work our way into the heart of 2024. 2 quick updates. I did forward a letter from the Department of Environmental Quality concerning groundwater protection. The Board of County Commissioners is going to meet with DEQ on February 7th. And that will provide an opportunity for the Department of Environmental Quality to get into some of the details that letter discussed. Groundwater protection has been a prominent topic in this part of our county for decades.
They don't respect me, and I
We will,
fucking know way more than these assholes do, and I don't care. Like these people are nothing to me.
Commissioner Trowbridge, I believe your speaker is still on.
Have I?
Started, I felt like you were just speaking on details and facts.
Okay, in any event, this issue will be a prominent topic as we head into 2024. Of course, long-range planning is working on a Newberry Country plan and scoping that out. We're well aware of the comments that have come from Three Sisters, or I should say Three Rivers community. I will be sending you early next week a list that summarizes the work that the Community Development Department with support from DEQ has made over the last 30 years. It's something we're providing to the Board of County Commissioners as they prepare for their meeting on February 7th. The list isn't exhaustive, but it'll give you, I hope, an understanding amount of energy and resources and programs that are even placed today that we are undertaking to try to protect groundwater in this part of our county. So more to come on that, and we'll keep you up to date on those conversations as they occur. I'm sure it will be more than just one meeting in February. The other update on Wednesday, the Board of County Commissioners expressed support for exploring a business license to short-term rentals. We are going to be convening an internal work group to talk about what that might look like. And then the board expressed support for a informal working group to share a concept of what a business license might look like. So who might be participating in that informal work group? Sun River Homeowners Association General Manager James Lewis wanted to coordinate. There was a representative of a neighborhood that has a strong homeowners association, wanted to understand how covenants, codes, and restrictions would or would not be applicable to a business license. So there's a lot to work through. I think our expectation is that a business license would not be a land use permit. So you have to write it in a way so that it doesn't require any kind of interpretation as part of our zoning code. And that is going to prove to be, I think, very demanding. Lincoln County is one county that did originally establish a program. At one point, it was upheld by LUBA that their program did not trigger land use, but it has still been subject to litigation. So more to come on that. It's going to take us as a county, I think, several months to vet what this business concept looks like, share it with this internal working group to be determined who those individuals are, report back to the Board of County Commissioners to get their feedback. And then if they're still committed to doing this, then we would schedule a hearing with the Board of County Commissioners so they could take testimony on an amendment to Deschutes County Code, presumably not a land use zoning code, because if that was the case, it would come before you first. If it was outside of that subject matter, then the board can hold a hearing, can take testimony, and consider adopting a business license program into the code that we would administer. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's staff that would be involved in terms of inspections, what code enforcement looks like, what's reviewed. We need to make sure that there's just so many facets to it. Like the goal 11, or excuse me, the Department of Environmental Quality, groundwater protection conversations, which could include a conversation about goal 11. I will keep you informed as those conversations occur over the next several months. So that's all I have. So thank you for a productive meeting, and I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Will?
Thank you. Good evening. Very briefly, of course, clear and objective standards. We've got some feedback from the consultant and DLCD. There's still a couple of weeks out on finishing that. So we have stepped up into full gear to work on that. Again, the general outline of the approach that we're taking under the board's guidance is to work through a kind of a staff initiated identification of problem areas of the code, recommended changes, a public rollout of that, incorporating that feedback, and then bringing those proposed amendments back to the Planning Commission. Just wanted to let you know that when Peter says that a lot of our resources are eaten up, that's where it's going these days, and that's in full swing. Board of County Commissioners had voted to reopen the transportation system plan. There were some written comments that came in after the record was closed that they wanted to bring in. So there, you'll see a mailing if you would participate in that process. There's a 2-week reopening of the public record for additional written comments. Tumalo Community Plan deliberations are still incoming. And those were the key things I had for you.
Tanya?
Not much, but just to thank again, former Chair Karas and Vice Chair Hopecamp for your leadership. It's always a pleasure and I think we all keep each other in line, and I like that. I'm very appreciative of that. And just thanks for all your service, and looking forward to new phases and new learnings together. And thanks for this process. I know with the RVs, it is really complicated. So I appreciate the way that you're really giving this a lot of thought, and I think it's good, and we'll just keep going. So thank you.
Commissioner Cyrus?
I'd like to
Oh.
thank, what's that? Oh, I'd like to thank, Chair Kieras for an excellent job, and like to compliment, current, our new chair on congratulations on being elected, and nice job tonight. Thanks.
Commissioner Hovkamp?
Thank you. I just would like to, again, respectfully offer this observation, colleagues, and I do mean it respectfully. My understanding of Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure and the utility of them is that they provide a well-known standard, and they allow for an organized, efficient proceeding for meetings. And efficiency is key to that. And when we get so wrapped up in procedures to the point that we feel that we cannot say anything, for instance, unless there's a motion on the table and it's been seconded, and it's done prior to full consideration of the implications of that motion, and then we spend valuable time, all of your time, backing back out of that, tabling it or trashing it, starting again, or offering friendlies, and then we get into a hierarchy of nested and friendlies and amendments and so forth, and have to back out of that, then we lose one of the main reasons, for the compelling reasons for using Robert's Rules, which is efficiency. I'm not suggesting that we should throw out Robert's Rules of Order. Far from it. I think we should adhere to Robert's Rules. I would just like to respectfully offer that with a little bit of allowing for instance, an opportunity for some discussion about, limited discussion about what a motion might look like prior to making it, that we don't have to spend so much time then tweaking it, shaping it, or backing back out of it. For instance, we might have heard from staff that, having a motion with an acreage minimum and a variance as part of the motion is not really necessary or desirable. I offer those comments respectfully. I'm not pointing at Commissioner Cyrus's motion. I mean, I could have used any motion as an example. We continually get into those situations. You all have served on other boards and commissions. I'm not the only one. We all use Robert's Rules. There's just there's a point where we get so constipated with procedure that we actually defeat the very efficiency that we're after. Robert's Rules, great. Strict and absolute adherence to the point that we lose efficiency, not so great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Vice Chair?
So just in terms of the ongoing discussion about Robert's Rules, I agree with Commissioner Hovkamp that it's really helpful to have an idea about what a motion could look like. And that's something that I worked with staff on during my term as chair, and I believe improved the process in response to feedback that I got from fellow commissioners. And so something that staff has done that I think has worked really well, and I'd love to continue to see you guys do, is in our packets, we have these multi-question outlines for our deliberations. So what somebody could do if they want to make a motion is they could simply read the motion that's suggested there. For instance, it says, should there be a minimum acreage requirement for RVs as rental dwellings? Somebody said that they wanted to move that there be a 1 acre minimum with an up to 10% variance. The only problem with that motion turned out to be that there is already a process in place for that. And this is an excellent organization. So I think if people want to improve this process and make it a little bit more streamlined, a little less clunky, I think you should read the packet and look at what the staff are suggesting would be helpful things for the board to know. Simply look at the packet, make a motion from that, or if there's a different motion that you would like to make, just make that motion. Then we will vote on the motion. If the motion fails, there's an opportunity for another motion. And with the multi-amendment process, I don't really think it's so necessary to add amendment after amendment after amendment. You could just say, well, I plan to vote no on this motion because I really want there to be an opportunity for there to be an exception based on lots that are already sewered. So I plan to vote no on this motion. And then you vote no. And if your colleagues agree with you, if there's a majority, then that motion fails and you then make a motion for what you want. So I don't think this process needs to change at all in order to become less clunky. I think people need to think about in advance of the meeting what motions they'd like to make, what's important to them, and then just simply say what it is that you want to happen clearly, and the rest of the commission will vote on it. That's how we keep this efficient and streamlined.
Perfect. Commissioner Altman.
Thank you to everybody. I'm glad. I appreciate everybody being willing to go home early because I assume the roads are really icy and I don't want to be driving late at night. Thank you to the two of you for your service, Vice Chair Curis, former chair, and Mr. Hofkamp. And good job on your first meeting. I think that if I were in your shoes, I would have been really intimidated, and you handled it very well. So congratulations and well done. And thank you as always to staff.
Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff, for always answering my questions when I call as well. I really appreciate you guys always being available. So thank you. And we may not agree on much, but we agree that we are stoked to have you as our leader. So thank you for saying yes.
We have Commissioner Trowbridge on the line still. Okay, that's what I thought. All righty. Thank you everyone for a vote of confidence in me. Did not expect two deliberations to be my very first meeting. So I did stumble through a bit, but I think we'll get it worked out. And I really look forward to working with the senior planners and the planning manager. Peter, I will also lean on you for guidance and information. So thank you very much. And Happy New Year.